Hello. Hi there, welcome back. How's everyone doing? Thank you, thanks for that. I wanted to thank Culinary Sciences, Northern Canola Growers Association, and UNOX for sponsoring our coffee, conversation, and flavor discovery tastings. And we are now headed into the last session of Worlds of Flavor. And it's my pleasure to welcome Giselle Kennedy-Lord back to the stage to discuss our gastronomic heritage and borders migration and culinary tradition through the lens of Slow Food's Ark of Taste. We'll have time for questions, and Giselle brought up something really great too, that also we're at a point where we would love to hear your reflections too in Slido. So questions and reflections in Slido, and so welcome Giselle.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks all of you. I just want to give a quick shout out to Jennifer and Abby and the whole CAA team for like a really, really extraordinary event. This is my second event here, and I'm really impressed and amazed at how well it goes and all of the really wonderful voices we get to hear from. This feels like the last paragraph of a college essay, because this is your last session. So I also want to applaud all of you for being here at all. This is, I think, the conversation we should be having and need to be having, and it's always been relevant, and it has always changed, and it will continue to change forever. And as Jennifer mentioned, I'm the co-author of a book called The Ark of Taste with David Shields. The Ark of Taste is a project of slow food. I'm going to go ahead and move to this cute little slide. And it exists all around the world, and it is meant as really a tool to promote biodiversity, which we got to hear Pierre and Ibru talk about a little bit this morning, about the importance of really looking at diversity, variety, and ingredients, and what is still in cultivation and how to keep those things alive. I think also the Ark of Taste is really a sort of tangible and visual way of, it really embodies a lot of Slow Food's key values, which chief among those is preserving gastronomic heritage, tradition, and culture. And I think the really interesting thing about all of those pieces is that, I reflected for too long on the name of this event, and I was like, the evolution of culinary tradition, what does that mean? And I think that the reason it got stuck in my head is because the evolution of culinary tradition is tradition. This has been the case for hundreds of years. In preparation for today, I pulled a book off my shelf. It's a transcript of a 13th century Syrian cookbook. This is early stage cookbooks. It reads more like somebody's notes, kitchen notes. And even in this 800-year-old text, I could see influences, ingredients from outside of that area. There was references to measure this meat by the Iranian volume or the Egyptian volume. Not just ingredients and not recipes, but just influences. And this is evidence of the way we have shared culinary knowledge and techniques and ingredients for so long. And I think that's really important to remember when we're trying to kind of frame up tradition. What is tradition? Tradition, I think, after hearing from these great chefs for the last few days, is highly personal, it's regional, and it's really driven by where you are, who's around you, what grows around you, and all of these things, all of the traditions we now really heavily associate with different cultures. Like Jordan opened this whole conference talking about pasta al pomodoro, which he broke down into its constituent components, neither of which are from Italy. But, tomato sauce on pasta is very much associated with Italian food culture, as it should be, because it has become their tradition. It has become the sort of where we look when what do we do with pasta? And obviously they're the experts in pasta. But I think taking the lens of the Ark of Taste, or using the Ark of Taste as a framework, I think is really helpful and really renders a lot of interesting information and reflections on society and how we have sort of behaved and interacted with one another. So the Ark of Taste is a sort of roster, like a big list of products, but specific varieties. It's not just tomato, it's the Cherokee purple tomato. It's not just peppers, it's fish peppers. So these are individual items. It can be meat, fish, legumes, fruits, vegetables, all of it, that carry with them some sort of significant story, a cultural story usually. Many of them were or are endangered varieties, and that's sort of like item number one on the Ark of Taste agenda is tell you about it, get you excited about it so that you will grow it, so that you'll put it on your menu, bring it into your kitchen, find the farmers growing it so that it stays alive. Because we all know that when these things, people stop sharing seeds and putting them in the ground, they go away. And like Pierre said this morning, 90% of our biodiversity has already disappeared, and we ought to do our due diligence in keeping that 10% around. So what I kind of like to do is start with the ingredient, and I think this is sort of the frame the Ark of Taste gives us, is if we want to understand how to use an ingredient or where it comes from or what might go nicely with it, then let's look to that ingredient and its trajectory over time. And you can do this kind of with anything, and it's been done over and over and over again in the last 2.5 days. It's been really satisfying for me to all the things I'll talk about in the next 20 minutes have been really showcased by chefs over the last few days, by chefs that I really, really admire and I just think are remarkable people. And I think that we do well when if we want to start from the beginning, we take it back to landscape, environment, and ecology. And I have a habit of looking up words that I know the definition of, but I'm like, maybe I'm missing something, maybe there's something else there. And so I looked up ecology, and what stood out to me is that ecology is essentially the interaction of all living things. So that includes us. It's not just plants, it's not just water, it's not just the landscape, it's you. You are part of your ecology. And so gastronomy naturally is born of ecology, is born of how humans interacted with the things growing and living around them, and then how they interacted with each other and how they moved around. So we'll get to the moving around part in a second, but I think that it makes a lot more sense than national borders a lot of the time. If we're looking at, we're never going to not sort of say, this is my Indian food, this is my Lebanese food, this is my Mexican food. But I studied the crossroads between the Middle East and Latin America. I am of Lebanese heritage, and I find that area just wonderful in every way. I feel very connected to my heritage and my culture. And when I'm studying that, it's a tiny, tiny little country, and its neighbors are also quite small. And so if you look at this part of the world, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to try to assign foods, by national borders, because when you really look at it and you see these sort of pillar ingredients of a cuisine, they are shared with people occupying that same area. So you have Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and Lebanon. They all have these very sort of similar threads in their cooking because when they began cooking in this way, they're using a similar set of ingredients because that is what grows around them. And then they're sharing with each other and sharing with other neighbors in the region. And to hear Ibra this morning talk about bulgur, this is a super, super pillar ingredient of, I think, all of those cuisines. I grew up on the stuff. I've eaten tons of bulgur, and I really enjoy, it's a very sort of flexible grain, much like Pierre's fonio. You can kind of play around with it, do what you want with it. And I think ecology helps us to really set the stage. It is the foundation for understanding sort of where we can go with cuisine, with cooking, with gastronomy, and where it comes from. And I think that food has this really powerful potential to bring us closer together, to help us understand each other better, to connect. And I think looking at ecology allows us to really see what we share more than what we don't. And I think when people move around, they move from one to another, and they become part of a new ecology to them. And these beautiful, wonderful, delicious things happen when that happens. And so as an example, I want to give this spice mix. That is a spice mix. I think it's inside my veins. I have had so much of it in my life. It was my #1 after-school snack. It's not in the Ark of Taste in the U.S., although I meant to look it up. It might be in the Ark of Taste in one of the Middle Eastern countries that has slow food present, because this is absolutely a shared product across the Levant. It is both the name of the plant and the name of the mix. And you will find that in that little set of countries, they might mix it up a little differently. I've always found slightly different ratios of one thing or another. So za'atar is not oregano, it's not thyme, it's not marjoram, it is za'atar. It is its own thing, it's a different plant. And the mix generally includes sesame, sumac, salt, and za'atar. This is heavy in sesame. I love sesame, I love the taste of sesame. And also, you know, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm using what I have available to me. You know, Chef Chintan talked about paneer, and it's like not that good in the US, which I tend to agree with. Although I've had a lot of paneer in Indian restaurants. I'm like, where are you getting this? This is so good. I've never had access to something like this in the grocery store. And I think the same is true of a thing like this. But it's important to my family that it remained sort of in our lexicon, in our cooking, in our kitchen. And it was ever since, you know, they came here and I was a child. And I think it's a really good example of something that really is of a place, of an environment, because the za'atar generally grows wild. It is now cultivated, it is challenging to cultivate, and it grows wild. And so it is this thing that you can sort of easily latch onto. It's like, this is our thing, this is our world, and this is this really beautiful, delicious product that grows in the world around me. And so we can see many different iterations of za'atar in Middle Eastern cooking, and nobody knew what this was when I was 7, no one, except other Lebanese people. And now everybody seems to know what it is. It's really quite popular these days. I see it in recipes all the time, recipes that are not at all Middle Eastern recipes, and that's fine. Like, I think that this is inevitable. This is going to keep happening. We exchange, we grab onto something we love. Like, we've heard it from chefs here today who are mixing their own heritage with other cultures that they have grown to love. And they've done the work of understanding those foods and understanding the culture and understanding the cuisine. You know, Christine Lau put it really nicely yesterday. She kind of said, you know, you can look at this trajectory by sort of 3 ways: ingredient, technique, and flavor profile. And I thought, well, that's like a really nice way to package all these thoughts I have in my head. And so here's this ingredient, and it is worthwhile to just take it back. Look, where does it come from? What should it taste like? You know, talk to people who are of that ecology. It doesn't really grow here, and so we have to bring it here. And when it enters a new ecology, things change. And generally, this is brought here with people from the area, from the part of the world where it grows. And this beautiful thing happens when people move around. People move around in a lot of different ways, sometimes by force, sometimes by choice, and sometimes, you know, by other means. Sometimes people are moving from one place back to another, and there's a sort of a oscillation happening. This list on your right side is just, you know, kind of like pretty academic terms pulled arguably straight from my thesis on what happens when people move and start cooking their home foods in their new home. I got to go to Argentina, a country that I love very deeply, and spend time in the kitchens of Lebanese people, because I wanted to see how are you cooking Lebanese food in Latin America. This is what my research was. This is a food that I know, that's very familiar to me, and then a place that I love, I've always been really drawn to, Latin America in general. There were 2 major migrations out of Lebanon, one in the early 1900s and one later on 60s, 70s. And this early migration, lots of people landed in the Americas. And so these are 1st and 2nd generation Lebanese folks most of the time. And they have community, they have a lot of Lebanese people around them. And what I found is what is true all the time, is that when you get to a place like Argentina from Lebanon, you don't have the same ingredients and products that you had in the Middle East. This is a different ecology, it's a different weather, climate, environment, culture, all of that is different. And so people do things like this list on the right. I'm not gonna define these for you. I think you all understand what that means. The blue is this sort of, like I said, academic way of sort of categorizing the behavior, essentially, of people in the kitchen. And then the brown part, to me, feels like this is what's happening like in one's heart, in one's mind, in one's body. We bring our embodied experience, our embodied knowledge with us wherever we go. And Kiana Moju said so many things that I'm like, oh, she's the perfect example of this happening in this really beautiful way, and it's so unique to her. because here she is with a Nigerian and a Kenyan parent, and she grew up in California, and she's doing this thing where she's mixing all of those together with great respect and reverence for her heritage, and also an openness to changing it, to make it work in this ecology, in this place where she now lives. And I wrote down a couple things because so many of these chefs said beautiful things. And she said something about how when you encounter food that is familiar to you, it makes you feel closer to home. And I actually wrote the quote, "There is great power in associating with other cultures by rooting in what's familiar, because it goes against the distance that has now been put between you and the place where you're from or the place where your people are from." I didn't grow up in Lebanon, I grew up in California. So the food was our greatest connection to my culture, and I really ran with that, like all the way. And it's because it's scientifically true that your taste center, much of which lives in your nose, is directly connected to your memory. It's why when you have a smell, you smell something, you think, my grandmother's in the next room, she must be. Like it triggers these little bits and pieces of our memory. And in that way, I think it has so much to do with who you are. Like your cooking is who you are. Wherever you grew up, wherever you are from, wherever your ancestors are from, we cook who we are. We cook to express our identity. And so it becomes very precious and very important that we make space for chefs and people to share that, to share who they are. And I think we saw that with, there are breakout sessions. I didn't get to see every single person. I only occupy one body. But I heard that from every chef in the last 2.5 days. Everything they're putting on the table is an expression of who they are and where they're from and what they have come to know and to love. And it's really, really important for people. My family moved to the United States in a time when there wasn't a terribly warm welcome. And I always was curious about this. I was like, you guys are like most Lebanese in the kitchen. Like this thing explodes. You're cooking, and all of a sudden you're speaking Arabic, and all of a sudden there's this like thing happening. And it's a safe place. And I think that this combination of they felt safe in the kitchen with each other, and there's these smells and these ingredients and all of these things that make them feel closer to home, just like Keanu said, like, it's very visceral, it's very, like it's really happening inside of you, that your memory is coming online, even if it's not your memory, it's your grandmother, it's your grandfather, it's ancestors way beyond that. And I think another beautiful thing is happening right now, that when I was growing up, all Middle Eastern restaurants were called Middle Eastern restaurants. And so there wasn't like a lot of space to say, this is an Iranian restaurant, this is a Lebanese restaurant, this is a Syrian restaurant, whatever it is. And the menus were largely very similar. And I think now, like a couple of chefs have expressed, like people are ready for really individual interpretations of culture and food culture. And more than ever, we are of mixed heritage. So it's not ever going to be the same from one person to the next. And it's really, really very limiting when we expect that, when we expect the menu to be very recognizable. That Thai menu, I'm not Thai, I don't have a lot of experience. I mean, I did get to spend some time in Thailand, and the food is like so amazing, and everything is different. I felt like every single dish I had was a different thing. And I want that menu. I want the menu that is yours, that is expressive of the region you're from, the family you're from, the culture you grew up in, the ecology your family is from, the ecology you now live in. And all of these things have to happen to make that food possible. So I think that, I just want to make sure I'm saying correct names and this sort of thing. Chef Hanif said that the weather and climate in Northern California is similar to that of Northern Iran, which I find like really exciting, and I am excited to learn more about that. But there are still products that don't grow here because they're really not part of sort of the cultural, agricultural lexicon, and we hope that they will be someday. But then he goes on to mix things, to put things together, to try to substitute. We saw Pierre use soy sauce to get a fermented flavor that is from Senegal, but we have to look around and sort of find those flavors and then keep tasting it until it's kind of just right and something your grandmother might be proud of. I think this is like a really common idea and driver in the food world. I knew this would happen. I'm like, I don't have enough to say, and I'm running out of time. Okay, I'm good. We're good. I've got you now. The fish pepper is in the Ark of Taste, and I think if we want to kind of pull back from okay, we're looking at identity, culture, heritage, place, and a sense of place is really important. And I think if we pull back and look at individual ingredients, they're a really strong piece of that sense of place. The fish pepper was, I encourage you to learn more about this pepper in particular. Michael Twitty has done some great conversations and writing about it. It came probably from the Caribbean or from Africa with enslaved people, and these people heroically managed to tuck seeds into their hair, sew them into their clothing. They brought a lot of things, a lot of agricultural product to the United States. And we're kind of doing this full circle thing, I think, where we're finally saying, like, hey, that rice, that is thanks to African people who were brought here by force. They were the ones that brought it here, and they were also the ones that knew how to grow it. The whole rice industry of the South would not be without them. The fish pepper, and a lot of peppers are similar. Peppers are so interesting to me because they have two centers of diversity, and they're everywhere, and there's so many of them, and like each of them contains multitudes. Like, I want to talk to Pierre about the Scotch bonnet. I want to talk to Keanu about the habanero. She said that it immediately feels like Nigerian food if there's habanero pepper in it. So there's so much power in a single ingredient. And I think to be really thoughtful about where those ingredients come from and what do you know about them and how much can you learn about them. And this fish pepper I'm seeing, the reason I wanted to kind of highlight is because I'm seeing it in a lot of places. My friend Danny Childs wrote a book about cocktails. He's an ethnobotanist, brilliant cocktail maker, won a James Beard Award this year. And he was the first time I sort of became acquainted with the fish pepper. And he had put it in a cocktail and kind of told a brief story about it. And so then I looked and I learned kind of the rest of the story. It was probably traditionally used in a hot sauce instead of a tabletop condiment, goes on everything. And now we see it used in all sorts of different ways, in a cocktail, for example. And I don't think there's a right and a wrong. I think because it all depends whose hands it lands in. And if we make space for this evolution, if we make space for these two things living together because they have to, for tradition and heritage and culture, and respect and reverence for those things alongside letting them evolve in the hands of skilled cooks. I think all of this tradition comes from home. I think this is a really important thing to remember because I think most of you are food service professionals, and you are sort of the folks that are taking it from home to the outside world. And so don't detach yourself from that food. I think cook what you know and cook what you love, and let the people in your kitchen, in your employ, cook what they know and what they love. Like, I think it's amazing that Chef Chintan told his Filipino employee to go ahead and start a Filipino restaurant because that's what he knows and that's what he loves. And I think that kind of space is what is going to like move us forward into food tradition for a new generation. We are always a new generation, and every single new generation has moved us forward in some way. And now, because we are so beautifully mixed and so beautifully influenced by others, and the information comes at us from far away very quickly, there's so much we can do with this. But I think it's really important to kind of continue to break these dishes down into their constituent components and learn more about them. And then if you look back at where they're from and the traditional dishes they're a part of, then you can get a lot of inspiration about what to do with it. What did Caribbean people do with the fish pepper? Let that be the driver of what you're going to do with the fish pepper. And Ista does that in her food. Yesterday it was really fun to watch her because she is of mixed heritage. I mean, she lives in London and she's cooking Brazilian, Mexican, this really cool mix. And she's really driven by, it seems to me that she's really driven by the ingredients. And she does her homework in learning about those pieces. And she said herself, it sometimes is not the best produce that she has access to, but she's using it anyways because this is important to this dish. It's important to her expression and her gastronomy, and she gets to share it with the world from a real unique place, same as Keanu, this real individuality of this is who I am, and this is the food that I know and I love. So just to kind of full circle, I think that just remember that this evolution has been happening for hundreds of years, if not more, and it is an important part of tradition. And I think at the same time, tradition is really important, but don't be afraid to break it down. to figure out like, oh, tomato is from Mesoamerica. And so they did different things with tomatoes than the Italians did when it arrived there. And also consider, how did things get there? No food gets there entirely on its own. No ingredient gets there on its own. And that's where the Ark of Taste, I think, comes in handy, is learning, because there are things in the U.S. Ark of Taste that are not native to the U.S. They came here with, lots of them came here with enslaved people, and lots of them came here with migrants and immigrants and people of other cultures, and then they grew well here. And I think that's another important thing to remember, is that we can be driven by what works in the place where we are and not force it. Don't push too hard on a thing. And just as sort of a side note on authenticity, I think we get a little tripped up on this, and I think rightfully so, because I think it can become a little problematic. And I am a bit of a pacifist. I'm like, I want us to sit around a dinner table and talk about who we are and connect with each other and use food to its full potential to bring us together. And I think that when we start to say that's right and this is wrong, it's like we're eliminating that space that I think we really need to progress gastronomy and to tell those stories. And I think that what is key to tradition and authenticity and to preserving that is record keeping, and we are excellent record keepers. I mean, how many cookbooks do all of you have in your kitchen right now? Me, I'm like tried so hard not to buy another one this week, but I sure did. And our records just keep getting better. There are photos, there are personal memoir, there are cookbooks, there are history books, sociology studies, and all of this, from 13th century Syria to now. We are keeping these records, and so we have that, and we can lean on that a bit and tell your story. And I think to note that you will find, if you look at all those cookbooks on your shelf, much of the authentic food that you are looking at and enjoying, it really comes from a very personal place. It comes from someone's home, from someone's family, from someone's experience. And like, question what makes something feel authentic to you. And I don't think that should be like the number one thing, because just like in the session I hosted with Chef Chintani said, if our grandmothers lived across the street, their masala might be different. In Mexico, an absolutely wonderland of gastronomy, there are such regional differences from one place to another. It is absolutely impossible to say this is Mexican food. Because this is individual, this is experiential. What is true to you is right for you. And yes, you should share it with other people and talk about it and let that happen. I don't think just like, again, Chef Chintani, you don't have to walk up to every table and be like, how can I tell you as much information as possible about what you're eating? But answer the questions when they come and put things in front of people that seem a little risky. And I think you might find that people are ready for it, especially kind of in this zone. I know a lot of you are not from Northern California, but I mean, this is a community that's ready for it. I live in Portland. We are ready for it. Many of our favorite, most beloved restaurants are absolutely run by people who are cooking their home foods, what I call home foods, and sort of elevating those foods to bring them into just like modern, really high-level gastronomy. And some of them they didn't go to culinary school, they don't have, technical training, which I think culinary school is awesome. But I don't think it's requisite for sharing. Go to culinary school if you want to. But it's not requisite for sharing or sort of being uplifted as a really, really great chef and cook. But I think that when we merge this personal individual experience and heritage and your story with this really, really strong technique and skill and approach and learning from other chefs, that when those two things come together is when we get what we saw in the last 2.5 days. These people are very talented, they're highly skilled, and they're also very smart. And they're also using their heart in their cooking. I mean, they don't separate those things ever. And I think we all saw that in the last couple of days. And isn't it thrilling? I love it so much. This is sort of my favorite story that kind of really exemplifies everything I just talked about. So I love shawarma and I love al pastor. I love both of them. Anytime I'm in either place, I'm going to look for those things. what a lot of people don't know, and what a lot of people do, probably a lot of you do know, is that shawarma as a technique, so to go back to what Christine said, is if we look at it as ingredient technique and flavor profile, when the Lebanese came to Mexico, largely the Yucatan, and the diaspora is all over the Americas. We are many. When they came there, they brought essentially the technique of shawarma, but they weren't able to bring all the pieces. Pork is not common there, and so we make shawarma with lamb now in Lebanon and neighboring countries that also make shawarma. You'll find it with lamb, with chicken, with different meats, but obviously pork is a popular meat in Mexico. So when it got to Mexico, what happened was they used this technique and then just replaced each of the pieces with what was sort of bountiful in their ecology. And I think an interesting part of that story is that, so they replaced the lamb with pork, they replaced this set of spices with chile and achiote and all these other, regional spices. The flatbread or lavash became tortillas. You can just kind of see so the technique was the thing that carried over. And then they did this really wonderful thing, and they still do it, and they call them tacos árabes, which to me feels like a nod to where it comes from. And I think if we don't allow for that kind of thing, because who in here loves al pastor or shawarma, and nobody, I'm going to make an assumption that nobody wants to see either of those things go away, and nobody wants to say no to either of those things. It's really a beautiful evolution of culinary tradition is sort of encompassed in these two really beautiful dishes. This is the thing I hope to write about because it really showcases this trajectory, the migration, and the way we evolve gastronomy to great ends. And I think I see tacos árabes a lot more in Mexico, calling the taco that, than I do outside of Mexico, and I think it feels really important. It feels, it makes me feel like, oh, okay, well, you guys know where it came from. And it's also okay that many things have been integrated into Mexican cuisine that come from the Middle East that people don't know. Kibbeh, Chef Gabe talked about that yesterday, that kibbeh, he didn't even know that was a Middle Eastern food until he looked into it a little bit more. But it's really kind of delightful. I went to the Yucatan while I was studying, and I found kibbeh, and I thought, this is so cool. The train station I arrived in had a vendor making it, and it was really quite good, and this is another food I grew up on, and is also common to that whole region. And I think that we have to make space for these things. And then we also have to give respect and give credit where credit is due and tell those stories and share those stories, because just as much as people are ready for sort of bold new flavors, they are also ready for the story. And it may not always be asked for, and it may, some people don't need it and don't want it, but I think that let's use our excellent record-keeping ability and capacity, let's keep using that to keep those traditions alive and to really remind people where things and dishes and ingredients come from. This is, I'm like, what is this? This is hey, here are some things I'd love for you to kind of leave with. And I would love to hear what you are leaving these few days with. On the right side is actually a recipe by Chef Pierre Thiam. He is, like I said earlier today, a really wonderful player in the slow food world, a really important community member there because he is such a champion of all the values of slow food. And this recipe is in the Ark of Taste book. The Ark of Taste is a collection of short stories with a sprinkling of recipes, I like to say. It's not quite a cookbook, but there are a number of recipes in it. And he's using Carolina gold rice. This is a rice that was brought to the South by enslaved Africans. He's using peaches. Georgia peaches, kind of your classic sweet peach for the region, and coconut, which is obviously not from the United States. And I think that what he does with his cooking is uses who he is and the flavors and ingredients around him and the things that he loves to make something new and delightful and exciting. And he does not separate the story or the ingredients from the outcome, from the dish itself. So be bold. Be respectful, and cook what you love, tell your story, and encourage the people around you, especially on your team, to do the same. And I encourage you to be thoughtful and curious about where your ingredients are coming from and what they are, and culturally sensitive to people's need and the importance of people being able to access their identity and the people they love and the people they have lost by way of cooking. And with that, I would love to take your questions or hear your thoughts and reflections, if there are any.
So we still have time if people want to add a question, but we do have 2 thoughts. Keegan offers that this is the first time at Wolf for Me. The Spanish Texas cuisine session really helped connect and understand some of my heritage that I have never had a chance to dive into. Thank you for that. We love to hear that. Yeah. And then Matthew offered that I feel this could be a continuation of last year's conference and what authenticity means. Food cultures and traditions migrate, embrace that as heritage. And so does anybody have any questions for Giselle before we close it out? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So that's a wrap on the 26th Annual Worlds of Flavor. I hope you enjoyed your time with us. I know I absolutely did. Thank you to our guest chefs and presenters who brought our theme alive in delicious and thoughtful ways, and the sponsors and partners who made this possible. As I had coffee this morning outside at our beautiful garden, I watched Avia, one of our wonderful culinary staff, pick something from a tree in our garden, and I asked her about it. She said she was harvesting bay leaves. And as the internet says, I was today years old when I learned that bay leaves came from a tree. I had only ever, before I moved to California, I had only ever known them as something that we kept around in my house for like 12 years. I mention this because the pursuit of knowledge excites me, specifically around food, and that's really the spirit that Worlds of Flavor is imbued with. This year's theme has truly come to life, and what a wonderful opportunity we've had to learn about how people move across the world, how that impacts their lives and our foodways. For the challenges that we face now and into the future, this sense of wonderment, curiosity, interest for other traditions and cultures, and fellowship with each other as humans is only going to be more important. On behalf of the Strategic Initiatives team, thank you for giving us the space and attention to do this work and for sharing with us in this exciting gastronomic and intellectual journey. And now you will indulge me as I have just a few housekeeping notes, but fun things. So recipes, resources, videos, the webcast feed, we will send an email that will have a link to those things, the password, and this will be a resource for you going forward. We'll have a survey. Our team just loves to hear your feedback. We have some upcoming conferences and summits that we'd love for you to join. We have our Wine and Beverage Summit, which will be here at Copia. And this is really for anybody that you might know on your team and friends, family, who are in the beginning of their beverage career. They get to marry theory with practice, and it's a really wonderful way for them to engage with people who are really crucial to helping them build their careers and move forward that way. You met my colleague, Abby Fairmartino. She leads our Menus of Change initiative, which has been going on for, I think, over 10 years. This is out at our Hyde Park campus, a really beautiful experience, and registration will open in a few weeks, and we'd love to see you there. And then we're excited to announce our next theme for Worlds of Flavor, and give me 1 second to scroll down. So this conference, Roots of Culture, Seas of Discovery, Mediterranean Cultural Culinary Tradition, Exchange, and Invention in the 21st Century, will bring an amazing delegation of top chefs and talented cooks from all around the Mediterranean, from east to west and north to south, as well as from across the U.S. And now I'm going to ask my colleague Abby to take Giselle. Giselle's going to be signing her Ark of Taste book. It's a really beautiful book, and as she mentioned, has been acknowledged through both James Beard and IACP, the International Association of Culinary Professionals. I have a note for anyone who's with a K through 12 organization. They're going to try to do a group photo out front by the CIA backdrop right in our entrance. And now we will head to the World Marketplace with delicious dishes by our guest chefs. Make sure to visit all three areas. We've got second floor, first floor, and the live fire outdoor terrace. Well, you will hear the Latin Balkan sounds of Istanbul Connection Sextet. It's time to go eat, maybe have a drink. Thank you.
Charcuterie boards are a visually stunning and versatile shared appetizer that have recently grown in popularity and have evolved far beyond meat and cheese boards. I'm going to show you how to put together a beautiful vegetarian charcuterie board with pastrami-cured portobello mushrooms, cured and smoked peppered beets, smoked celeriac and wild mushroom terrine, pickled vegetables, tomato chutney, and more. You don't need to make an entirely vegan board like I did here, but adding just some of these plant-based elements to a traditional charcuterie board makes it much more plant-forward and unique for your guests. We're going to begin by making this really versatile brine, which can be used to bring out the flavor in all sorts of vegetables. In a sauce pot, add water, kosher salt, Knorr professional liquid concentrated vegetable base for a kick of umami, agave syrup for some sweetness, peppercorns, a bay leaf, and some crushed garlic. Bring this mixture to a boil, then allow it to cool completely. Once the brine is cooled, we'll use it to make these pastrami-cured portobello mushrooms. In a mixing bowl, combine the brine with some tamari. Add cleaned and trimmed portobello mushroom caps and brine for 24 hours. After they've marinated, I've gone ahead and drained and rinsed my portobello caps. Here, I have a mixture of ground coriander and pepper. Coat the mushroom caps with that mixture. Next, smoke the mushroom caps at 180 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. I'm using an outdoor smoker, but you can also use a hotel pan smoker. Allow the smoked mushroom caps to cool enough to handle and slice the caps on a bias. Set these aside. Next up, we'll use our same marinade to make these cured and smoked peppered beets. I've cooked these beets sous vide at 185 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours. Then allowed them to chill. Place the beets in the brine to marinate overnight. Drain and rinse the beets. Next, roll the beets in ground black pepper to coat them. Slice the beets 1/8 inch thick and lay them out on a wire rack. Smoke the sliced beets at 180 degrees Fahrenheit for 1.5 hours. Set these aside and allow them to cool. Another item I'm adding to my charcuterie board is this smoked celeriac and wild mushroom terrine. Let me show you the different components of the terrine and how to put it together. First, I have Swiss chard that I've blanched and laid out on plastic wrap. Go over this with a rolling pin to make sure it's very flat and compressed. Line a terrine mold with the plastic wrap chard. Then remove the top layer of plastic. Mix together the smoked celeriac potato puree and sautéed mushrooms and spinach. Right before putting the terrine together, Mix in some prepared agar-agar. That's going to be the binding agent for my terrine. Go ahead and layer in the celeriac puree mixture. Level off the top and fold any excess greens over the top. Press down gently to remove any bubbles. Refrigerate the terrine for at least 1 hour. Once chilled, gently remove the terrine from the mold and cut it into 1/4 inch thick slices. Remove the plastic wrap after slicing. Now that we have our different components ready, let's put our board together. First, I'll fan out the slices of pastrami cured portobello mushrooms. I'll set out the smoked celeriac and wild mushroom terrine slices. Next, I have some condiments that pair really well with the flavors on this board. First, here I have some Hellmann's vegan mayonnaise blended with hot honey. I have some My Old Style mustard. I have some vegan cheese made out of cashew butter. And lastly, I have some sweet and tangy house-made roasted heirloom tomato chutney. Next, I'll place down the cured and smoked peppered beets. I have some pickled carrots and garlic cloves here. And finally, I'll add some toasted bread. The board looks great. This charcuterie board will give your customers a fun and engaging dining experience and allow you as a chef to use your creativity.
So my name is King Cook Daily and we're in Shoreditch, East London, and this is my little restaurant. So I started Cook Daily in 2015 and we are at my new location, which has been here for almost a year now. And it's a small little takeaway. We're around 10 seats and we just do good vegan grub. So the menu of Cook Daily is based on flavors from around the world, but with a heavy influence from Southeast Asia, especially Laos and Thailand. When I was a young kid, just going to Thailand and seeing all the street food, I was just so inspired by it, you know. So I knew that moving forward in my career as a chef, I wanted to kind of like bring the element with like street food, plus all the fine dining and all the classical mixture that I've been learning, and just put all in one and present it into a bowl. Yeah, I grew up with cooks. My father was a cook. He was a head chef of a famous hotel back in the 70s. He would bring home cuts of meat all the time. So, you know, as a young child, I was exposed to different cuts of meat and just the quality of good hotel food. So I always had that advanced palate as a young child. And I didn't do too well at school. So my mum said to me, you know, you're good at cooking. Your dad's a cook. He's taught you a few things. Why don't you consider going to catering college? So back in 1999, what's that, 25 years ago, I enrolled in a catering college, spent 2 years there, and then from there, went straight to work. Started off in market stalls, pub kitchens. And then when I say pub kitchens, you have to understand, like, back in the day, let's say 25 years ago, a lot of Lao people in London were running the kitchen pubs, selling Thai food, you know. A lot of people didn't know about Lao food back then. So it was like the Lao people that were doing pub kitchens and, you know, selling Thai food. And a lot of them were my family members, my uncles, my dad's brothers, you know, and my father, obviously. So I grew up around pubs as a young child. Straight after school, my dad would take me all the way to West London to Putney Bridge, where he had their own little pub kitchen. I would do my homework there. I remember these days. And then slowly my dad would say, "Yo, King," well, maybe not yo, but like, "King, come and dish up some spring rolls." So I remember I used to do the sweet chili, pour the sweet chili, add a little garnish and put the spring rolls on the plate. That was my little job. And then after that, they would sell pat sa'il, which is basically Thai style rice noodles, the thick noodles, like whole fun noodles in Chinese. So my job was to kind of like peel these noodles also, so they were like strands. And I remember that as a kid, you know, these memories. So yeah, I've been through it all, man. From, like I said, pub kitchens, restaurants, market stalls, Michelin kitchens. I've worked in a 2-star, a 1-star. I've worked in Spain for a French chef. And I gave up meat in 2009. I transitioned to a vegetarian diet. And in 2014, I went straight vegan. So the inspiration for me, you know, going meat-free and vegan, it was, to be honest with you, I burnt out, you know. Started from cooking when you're 16 and jumping straight into work around 18 and not stopping for like a solid 10 years plus. I kind of like, that's the only thing I knew was kitchen. So I burnt out and I needed to kind of reset. So I started going to the London Buddhist Centre, which is around the corner here in Bethnal Green. Started meditating and just going back to my Buddhist roots. I mean, my parents would take me back to Laos every year, and my granddad was a head monk of a temple, so I always had that connection. But as a young adult, I just reconnected. So I spoke to the elders from the London Buddhist Centre, and you know, they just gave me knowledge about you know, being ethical, and they just told me about, you know, the first precept, which is you know, I abstain to take life, etc. And it kind of like made sense to me. So I stopped eating meat and went on a vegetarian diet, and that lasted 5 years until I made the transition to going full vegan, and I haven't looked back since. I just saw the benefits of just cutting out dairy and milk and eggs, and yeah, from there I just thought vegan diet works well with me. So here I am today. Yeah, my diners, my customers, my guests, it's a mixture, you know. It's people seem to think that it's mainly vegans, but to be honest with you, I would say 50-50. Yeah, I think what I try to do is just create good food for the people, for the local. I know London and I know what people like and the flavors of London. So when you can create that, it just speaks to people, you know, whether it being vegan or not, or plant-based or healthy or not. But yeah, I would say it's a mixture of a crowd, my customers. Shoreditch, East London is the place to be, man. I mean, there's so many creative people around, you know, from film directors to artists, graffiti artists, musicians, you name it, tattoo artists. You know, it's all a big melting pot for creativity here, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. So my advice for other chefs that want to create more plant-based or vegan food, I would say just experiment more, man. I mean, you take a traditional Christmas dinner, you take away the turkey, the meat, the beef, and you're left with just veggies. So you have to get creative, you know. And that's what I learned when I transitioned. I was like, right, I don't have the turkey no more. I don't have the beef Wellington anymore. What am I gonna do? I had to get busy, you know, and think, how could I create just the sides, make the sides the main attraction? So it just gets you thinking more. It's like a restart, but it's fun, man. With the beef Wellington, I have my own version of mushroom Wellington, and it's just, you know, I would say like beef is quite savory, and mushrooms also savory, a good texture. If you cook it in a certain way, it can kind of replicate a meaty texture. So just with my experience and my palate, I can kind of like recreate these memories that I used to have with veggies. And yeah, I think the way I use veggies is like how I would cook meat. You know, back in the day I would sear the steak. These days I'm searing broccoli, you know, I'm charring it, getting an extra charness to add that smokiness to it, and that creates another flavor element to the dish. So things like that, you know, like if I was to use, let's say soya mince and make a bolognese, I would do it exactly the same way as I would with mincemeat, you know, from searing it and making sure that it's just slowly catching at the bottom, and then deglazing it with red wine and adding the rosemary and the thyme, and it's just kind of like, I don't think I would have that experience if I didn't work with meat in the past. So carrying it on, I'm grateful for this, you know, for this skill. Yeah, London town is I'm blessed to be here, especially in East London. I have no problem with getting exotic ingredients, to be honest with you, all year round. So Asian markets, South Asian, East Asian, Southeast Asian markets, I have it all. African, Caribbean, you know. We use a lot of plantains here. So my, my go-to is the African Caribbean shops, and all of my Southeast Asian flavors. Obviously, I go there, and then you've got the great British produce as well. So we're blessed in London. I have no problem of getting anything all year round. So what excites me? What excites me about cooking is going back to cooking, to be honest with you. When I first opened Cook Daily in 2015, I was cooking behind the stove, and then we grew and grew, got more popular. I kind of took a step back, and then coming back now, I've been here a year, I'm in the kitchen every single day, cooking every single dish. I've just fallen, back in love with cooking, and I realized that sometimes we kind of need to stay in contact and be on the line to kind of, just reconnect with that. So my time away from the kitchen, just running things behind the scene, it was great, but there was something missing, and that was that passion that I kind of lost along the way. So honestly, going back to the kitchen, I've found that passion again, you know what I mean? With me cooking my dishes, my bowls, I know that it's healthy. Like, I wouldn't feed my customers nothing that I wouldn't give to my children, you know what I'm trying to say? So obviously we're not junk food, we're not fast food. I would say we're like street food with a restaurant touch, you know what I'm trying to say? Even though it's a takeaway, but lunchtimes you'll see the whole little takeaway spot is packed. People are asking us, like, do we have toilet facilities? I said no, it's just a takeaway, but we want to put seats because we want people to enjoy the food when it's nice and piping hot. Obviously, people do take takeaway. I do deliveries, but my main customers come and just enjoy the food in our setting, I've done everything here, from the floors to, I've designed everything, and we've always done it like that way. Yeah, so, with it being such a small space in here, I just knew that coming back and opening in a prime location like Shoreditch, I just needed to bring that vibe again that I had before, that flavor. So it's the same that I've always done, It first started off with, not having a lot of money, doing things on a budget, handwritten menus, splashes with paint everywhere. I mean, I grew up doing graffiti, so it was just normal for me to juice up my marker and write my menus and use my leftover colors and just, decorate the shop. But it's become almost like a trademark now. So yeah, everything that's designed here is just by myself, and it's just having the ideas to kind of like bring color to the city, and especially with my graffiti background, everything's always handwritten. Yeah, I wish I could still handwrite the tickets that come to the kitchen, but yeah, we use a printer now. The style of my food is colorful, You have your yoga fire. I name it the yoga fire. It's based on a Street Fighter character called Dal Sim, and on the menu description it says with dal simmered in golden coconut milk. So that's like my my take on the Street Fighter character, but also paying homage to the Indian yellow curry. So it has dal, chickpeas, sweet potatoes, finish off with raita, fresh yogurt, and some crunchy sev. That's like our Indian style curry in a bowl. And then you have your infamous curry, which is a Thai green curry from Thailand now. And that's like vibrant green. Normally green curry is not that green. But what we do here, I took my experience from making green smoothies. When I first went vegan, I was just doing green smoothies all the time. Banana, water, spinach. So I'm thinking, wow, this is so nice and vibrant. If I could add that into a green curry. So now what I do when I make the green curry, we add loads of spinach and blend the spinach with the coconut milk. And then we sieve it, so now you get like a nice green coconut milk. So our green curry is nice and vibrant. So these are colors, colors that speak to me, whether it be through graffiti, spray paint, or food. It needs to kind of represent, and especially us being a heavy vegetable restaurant. Yeah, it's just, you got your broccolis, your peppers, yellow, greens, oranges, and not just colors, but also vitamins, right? Like your B carotene, your vitamin D from your greens. It's all in one. So I'm just happy to feed healthy food and also make it look pretty, as you should. So this restaurant is just about good vegan grub, the chef crafted by myself, and it's made with love. And I know a lot of people say that, but when you're cooking every single dish, it's love, man.
Still fascinated by blue cheeses, we headed to Castilla y León. And ahead of us, many incredible cheeses mixed with sheep, cow, and goat milk to discover. So while the motor of the caravan roared and our stomachs rumbled just a bit, we got closer to Zamora. There, we had a unique opportunity to visit an Iberian-type blended cheese factory and learned everything about its industrial production process, not to mention the very high standards of quality and food safety of the European production model, which are incredible.
European blended cheeses are always the perfect appetizer.
Manuel showed us the entire factory and shared with us all of his passion and knowledge of the incredible world of cheeses. Among other things, he explained to us that almost half of the European cheeses from this region are blend cheeses. And depending on the time they spent maturing, they can be soft cheeses, which they mature for 7 days, semi-cured cheeses if they mature from 20 to 35 days, cured between 45 and 105 days, or old cheeses that spend the longest maturing time, specifically from 100 to 180 days. And if you ask us which are our favorites, the answer is very simple. Absolutely all of them. So we bought a good supply of mixed cheeses and we continued with our cheese road trip. Our next destination, Castilla-La Mancha. Let's go! Ready to play? Discover the European cheese stories at cheesestories.eu. Funded by the European Union,